All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. It's Thursday, what is it, the 14th, I guess, of November. Amazing how time does fly. And yeah, my computer for some reason isn't showing me the date, which is frustrating the heck out of me. I must have changed some setting. I'll try to fix that. I can look at my other screen, but it's totally out of the way, so it makes it harder. Yeah, got my little keffiyeh. There you see it around my neck. It's very nice, red and black and white, in honor of the Palestinian people beset by Israel and the United States. Tragedy, genocide continuing in our name. And all I can do, I go out, protest now and again. I don't do enough. I just do what I can. I hope you'll join me today. It's 240-242-5646. And we are going to talk about the Trump cabinet picks. How bad are they? Are they as bad as, well, the Biden cabinet? I don't know. It seems like that's a pretty low bar to crawl under. I think the jury's out, okay? I think the jury's out. We can go through some of the names, and we'll do that so far, who Trump has nominated. Certainly, this is not to defend Trump. It's not like it's a positive to be just as bad as Biden, right? I mean, you look at some of the people that he has had in office, and really, maybe it's a little unfair to judge him, because certainly Gaza and Ukraine, which are such terrible, terrible stains on America, they overshadow some policies that weren't bad. We hear a lot about Lena Khan as the antitrust czar at Justice, and apparently she did do some good work. I'm not really familiar with it. I probably should have studied more. I don't always, do all the homework I need to do. I do the best I can, folks, but it's not always good enough, so you need to look at other sources as well, besides obviously Halitics. But this is one of those places I think you should go in. The value that I think I add more than other live streamers, podcasters, hosts, whatever term you want to use, is having that dialogue. You can call in, you can talk to me, you can post at Halitics, or as one of my viewers referred to this program, Halitics, right? Halitics. Well, they must not watch that much if they call it Halitics, because I say the name about 1 million times during the program, but obviously they have at least observed it. So the value is you get to talk to me, and as one of the viewers noted, I do let you speak, and I listen to you, and I think I'm a lot nicer, right, and more respectful to views. Even people who call in and start cursing me out and, calling me a whatever, an effing whatever, yeah, I still want to hear what you have to say, because I think in the end, if we have that dialogue, we're more likely to get to a better place. By the way, Ari, thank you for complimenting my scarf. I do appreciate that very much. And, I said that about listening to people, and I don't always follow my own rules, right? I don't follow my own words. For example, man, I couldn't deal with that Zionist yelling, just incredibly hateful pro-genocide messages and attacking us at the Capitol. Well, it wasn't the Capitol. It was near the Capitol. It was the Senate office building, Dirksen building, right across a catty corner from that. Beautiful. The U.S. Capitol is so beautiful. I don't, D.C. is a belly of the beast. So many bad policies that lead to untold misery around the world and around the block originate here, or at least they're propagated here. Now, that we could be a force for good, we should be, and so often we aren't. In the past, sometimes we were. With FDR, with LBJ, there are some great federal policies that really did improve people's lives dramatically. Civil rights movement, was an example, not even thinking necessarily economics, although that's important too, promoting progressive, populist economics that leads to wealth redistribution down. That's really what I think the government needs to do now more than anything else. But certainly when you look at the civil rights movement and other policies that the government has pursued in the past, our federal government, they have really led to dramatic improvements in people's lives. That's not Washington, D.C. today, sadly. But again, as much harm as our legislators often do, it's beautiful there. That's a really nice area, the Capitol, if you haven't been up there. Lots of trees. There's lots of green. There's a lot of open space, not maybe as much parks as I would like once you go east of the Capitol, if you're familiar with the area, and when I say east of the Capitol, I mean going towards the Anacostia River, between Constitution and Independence Avenues. You don't really have quite as many open spaces. There's a few parks, but the Capitol area itself is beautiful and lots of greenery, and it's just a really nice, all townhouses. You don't have any high rises. It's a human scale area. Also, that Senate office building, very nice too. Dirksen, it's modern. It doesn't really fit in with the Federalist style that the houses mostly, were built under, but it's still very, very nice. All right, 240-242-5646 from Emogi, just letting you know YouTube isn't giving notifications for your live stream. Well, that is most unfortunate. That's kind of weird. I actually did get a notification this morning, Emogi, at 11:30. That I would be going live at noon. So I'm not sure, I don't know. It's really weird, and maybe they are suppressing me. I don't know, but I did get a notification when I was looking through my pop-ups for this program. So who knows? I don't know. It could well be they don't like what I do. I get that. They're not because, and it is Google, not because Sergey Brin or whoever the other guy is who run the company are focused on Halitics or Halitics. It's because there's probably some algorithm that looks and sees how much you criticize our Israeli, pro-Israel, pro-genocide policy. Maybe that's where they draw a line. The situation is horrific. It continues to be just so sad, so tragic. Here's Middle East Eye from this morning. 24 more killed yesterday. It's just so, words fail. We can show the images. I've shown those at some point. I hate to say it, people become numb and they just sort of move on, and they almost are like, well, we've heard enough. It's enough already with the Gaza. And I would say this, I can hear you say enough already with the October 7, right? With the Hamas attack at the music festival. I can hear you saying that because it's over, because Hamas isn't killing anyone right now. Because to the extent Hamas is holding some hostages, it's because Israel refuses to have any negotiations with Hamas, refuses to have any good faith discussion with Hamas, because Israel has decided that instead it's going to completely eliminate the people from Gaza. They're going to complete a regimen of ethnic cleansing, genocide, with the full support, the full backing of the Harris-Biden administration, and very, very likely the support of Trump. I don't want to say that yet because he hasn't actually taken office, but his words are very scary, very frightening. All right, 240-242-5646. By the way, there's a comment about due dissidence. Yes, I will actually play a clip from due dissidence. Made my life a little easier. They kind of repeat. Okay, due dissidence basically repeated what I said yesterday about the Harris-Biden's decision to continue without any abatement supplying Israel with killing weapons. So they agreed. They basically took my position, but they say it in a different kind of way. Maybe some of you would find it more persuasive. And I'm not all about aggrandizing myself and only doing what only promoting my stream. If the message that I believe is critically important can be promoted better by another host or hosts, then I'm going to be happy to elevate them. All right, 240-242-5646. All right, really nice stuff in the chat. If you get a chance and you want to go in there, the live stream chat. Let's get to some of these picks. The New York Times doesn't like them. There's a shock. They don't like when I say that the President-elect Trump's announcements, and that's really, I think, what they are for cabinet. They mention here Matt Gaetz, Tulsi Gabbard, and Hegseth. I think is his first name Mike. I guess it is. I don't know. He's a Fox host. So I'm just not going to get all upset about these picks. They don't really upset, they don't make my skin crawl the way many of you obviously feel when you read about this. Gaetz, is problematic for sure. I mean, they're not great. Gabbard, Hegseth, there's some positives there. They also don't mention Rubio. They don't mention Marco Rubio. So he has been, and I mentioned yesterday, I think it hadn't been yet made official that Marco Rubio would be, was going to be, presented to the Senate for confirmation as Secretary of State. Well, I believe that is now official. The Trump administration announced that. So they don't mention him in this article, but I'll get to Rubio as well. So we're going to focus on these four, not solely today, but they'll be a significant part of it. So you can see Katie Rogers here in the New York Times. She is obviously, she lets you know that she or her newspaper, she's providing this analysis. So it's not just facts. It's not just the facts, ma'am. It's also their opinion. And the opinion is not a positive one. He prizes loyalty over experience and is fueled by retribution. So let's start with the loyalty over experience. I don't necessarily have any problem with that. A lot of these experienced folks who've been bouncing around Washington for decades have done absolutely horrible jobs, have been terrible. And they made things so much worse. I mean, Elliott Abrams, hasn't he been like in various positions of great authority when it comes to foreign policy? He's one of the worst people in the world, and he's been doing it for 40 years, since the mid-'80s. Destabilizing Latin America and the rest of the world, promoting endless war. So, I don't necessarily, Victoria Nuland, another just horrible person. You see some of these longtime Washington insiders who shouldn't be empowered. So if Trump is saying, I want someone who's going to be loyal to my agenda, after all, I'm the president-elect. I got more than 50% of the popular vote and, over 60%, I guess well over 60%, 75%, somewhere around that of the electoral college. So they should be loyal, right? I mean, we elected Trump. I didn't vote for him, but the American public chose him. So shouldn't his cabinet picks be loyal at least to his vision? I would say absolutely. You can parse this different ways, but what you're really seeing is the New York Times hatred towards Trump. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you how great Trump is. I don't think he's great. I don't think he's even very good. But, if he gets us out of Ukraine, and I think this pick suggests maybe he will, that's better. That's better than Harris. Again, 240-242-5646. By the way, give me a like, and also the subscription button is in the bottom right. Let me see if I can get that up for you as well. Love to have you subscribe. I'm going to move my Halitics box over. So just a little bit playing around with the screen here, just so I can play my subscribe now. Hope that you will, in fact, subscribe if you haven't yet. I know most people who watch, they've already subscribed, but if you know someone who hasn't, maybe that can help. All right, fueled by retribution. We'll talk a little bit more about that. I don't think they make a very good case in here. I don't think Katie Rogers makes a very good case that any of these picks. I know they're really focused on Gates there for Justice Department Attorney General, but I don't see it. I didn't read it there, but we'll go through that. Let's start with some more issues that they have in the New York Times, why they're disappointed, or they feel that there's ample room for criticism of this of these choices. So first, there's no Mad Dog Jim Mattis, who chose to resign rather than abide by Trump's willful fraying of international alliances. Of course, that's during Trump's first term. Now, I didn't do a lot of research after I read this. My recollection was I thought Mattis was a pretty good, what was he, Secretary of Defense, I think? I thought he was pretty good. He really was. He was not a war hawk. He tried to tamp down tensions with other countries. He did not embroil us, did Mad Dog, in the Middle East. He didn't amp up war there. I think his biggest problem with Trump, as I recall, and I could have this wrong. And if you call in to let me know how I got it wrong, I'd love to hear it. By the way, I got to make sure. So let me see if I can see if the phone will ring, because that has been an issue, right? Is the phone doesn't always ring. So it's not fair to you. I say, hey, give me a call, and then I ask you to call me, and then you do call, and then I don't respond. So that's clearly an issue that you can have with me. But actually, I have a way of dealing with this. I'm going to see if I can come up with a better solution to the no call rule. But 240-242-5646. Anyway, we'll just hope. I'll just hope for the best. Mattis, I thought, was pretty decent when he was the head of the when he was Secretary of Defense. And I think the big issue there, as I remember, is he was opposed to Iran baiting. Trump was not a particularly bellicose or warmongery president. He was terrible when it came to the drones. He amped those up even worse than Obama, which was one of Obama's worst actions. So Trump, terrible there. But my understanding is Mattis was not big on war with Iran, and that was one place where he and Trump had disagreements. So that is a disappointment, right? Is if you don't have a mad dog in the room. But the fact that there's no John Bolton has to be viewed as a real positive. I mean, this guy was just one of the worst. It absolutely, he was in the UN. He made many enemies. He was not in any way a guy who was promoting peace. And I would disagree that there's not even a John Bolton. Elise Stefanik actually kind of channels John Bolton, rude, in your face, arrogant. So I think Stefanik, as the chair, the UN ambassador, actually is kind of a John Bolton. So that's just a incorrect statement by the writer there, Rogers. But I will just make a point here. Bolton was a bad actor in the first Trump administration, and the fact that he and Trump didn't get along actually reflects better on Trump than it certainly does on Bolton, because Trump didn't like Bolton's all-out push for war. And here's from Peter Baker. Peter Baker was on my program many years ago, a few times as a reporter. Then I believe with the Baltimore Sun, moved on to the Times. Does a great job. He's a really good reporter. So Trump ousts Bolton. This is 5 years ago. He got rid of him over the disputes over Iran, North Korea, and Afghanistan. So it's interesting. Bolton was even more hawkish on Iran and certainly North Korea and certainly Afghanistan than Trump. Mad Dog was less hawkish, I believe, when it came to Iran. So Bolton gets pushed out by Trump. And Trump said, hey, he was always pushing me to go to war, just like Liz Cheney. They want us to start killing people, and he wasn't about that. Pointing out, does Trump, or at least, does Peter Baker, that Bolton was trying desperately to stop, as an advisor to Trump, to stop the proposed agreement, the proposed withdrawal from Afghanistan. And this was in 2019. The withdrawal began at the very end of Trump's first term and then was completed by Joe Biden. And Biden got a lot of criticism for the way that the failures there, and maybe some of them were his fault. We took the troops out too soon and all that. But look, it was inevitable that there would be it was going to be messy. Whenever you withdraw from a region that you've destroyed, destabilized, there's going to be problems. So I never thought that was a fair criticism of Joe Biden. But in any event, you can see here Bolton waged a last-minute campaign to stop a peace deal. And to Trump's credit, he said, hey, I don't want this guy around if he's going to get in the middle of a peace deal with the Taliban. I don't remember this, but according to Peter Baker, I'm sure it's right, and this was contemporaneous with the event, the deal was scrapped. But in any event, it came back, right? Because we did get out of Afghanistan. So in the end, Trump got his way, which is good. At least we're not still there. At least we still don't have troops. I don't know if we have any troops in Afghanistan. We may not, which would be much, much better. So you have that situation where at least the Times being unfair, I think, or, well, that's their, they're just totally Trump-phobic. There's nothing Trump could do that they'll be okay with. Here's what they have to say about Rubio. So they like Rubio, Katie Rogers, and I guess the New York Times, obviously she's writing for them. It's their news analysis. They like Marco Rubio, which obviously makes me much more skeptical of Rubio, an established foreign policy hawk who has taken a hardline approach to China. So let's get into that briefly. With regard, and I talked about this yesterday with regard to Rubio, and I want to be very clear, this is not to defend Trump. I'm just trying to give you my take, my honest view of these choices. And, maybe it's to defend a little bit, though, against those who have been just excoriating me for not voting for Harris on the ground that Trump was so evil, so bad, everything he would do would be so terrible that even if you, acknowledge, even if they acknowledge that Harris is complicit in genocide, and I know the argument is, she had no power, it's all Biden. She says she had power. She says she was in the room. She says she agreed with these plans. And the implication, the strong implication that Kamala Harris made when it suited her during the campaign is that she actually had some say. And I believe that. I'll tell you why. Because if she had been in that room when they were discussing, when she and Antony Blinken and I guess whoever's the UN ambassador or the ambassador to Israel and the NSA and all them were all talking about helping Israel and giving more aid to Israel and providing aid to Israel. Probably Chucky Schumer was in that room, and certainly Hakeem Jeffries. All those Zionists were all together pushing for more aid to Israel. If Kamala Harris had said, this is just wrong, look, we're pushing against history. We will be remembered for war crimes if we do this, that would have made no difference. Those people couldn't care given a rat's ass about statements like that. But if she had said, and I'm going to the media, I'm going to speak out against this. I cannot sit quietly. Plus, I want to be president. And I don't want to be harmed by, I don't want to be, besmirched, diminished, as I will be if I don't speak out against what we're doing. If she had done that, I think it would have made a huge difference. At least she could have tried. And she didn't. So I don't want to hear any excuses for Harris that she didn't have any power, she didn't have any influence. A, she said she had influence. B, any sober analysis of the situation suggests she did have influence over what the Biden-Harris administration was doing. Now, that said, this is, that's why I didn't vote for her. That's the simple answer, if you want one. But also those who say, well, it doesn't matter. Trump will be even worse. Let's go through these picks and see if he really will. And we don't know. We don't know. They're not in power. We'll see what happens. Rubio has been a hawk. It's true. But I don't, he'll probably do whatever Trump tells him to a degree as Secretary of State. I have never been a Sinophile. That means a China lover. I've never embraced China. I think China is our biggest global enemy, if you will. And I think they're not just our enemy. They're a real threat. They're a military threat. Now, not that we aren't. Of course we are. But I don't want China to rise. I want us to pull back. I want us to be a great global citizen, but I don't want American empire to be vying with Chinese empire. I want it to be a world where there's, many power centers and countries are largely acting independently. China doesn't allow countries to act independently. We may well be worse. But I do agree with Trump when he said the real challenge that we face is from China. The challenge economically is from China, well over 1 billion people, a sophisticated military, a totalitarian regime. Those are all real issues. And we should be negotiating firmly with China. That's one of the big reasons, too, I support the tariffs. Because we have, just as we may wring our hands about Israel and how terrible Israel is, it's completely meaningless when we keep giving them bombs and missiles and machine guns and tanks. It doesn't, it's meaningless. We're saying, oh, you're so bad, but we don't stop them before they kill again. We give them the weapons. Well, China is risky, and we have, is scary in a lot of ways. And we have enriched and empowered China with our most favored nation status, pro-free trade status. So I don't necessarily have a problem with China. Does China control other countries apart from Taiwan? Well, China has Tibet. I mean, they've completely occupied Tibet to the extent you want to view that as at least a semi-autonomous region, Tibet, and they've certainly leaned heavily into Tibet. There's also, they don't control Taiwan. Taiwan is independent, but I want Taiwan to remain independent. I think Tibet is an example of where you have to really worry. China. Also, how they've taken away all the freedoms in Hong Kong. I mean, Hong Kong was, when it was part of the UK, was free. You could say whatever you want. It was a perfect country, but it was free. Now it's not. You can't say whatever you want. You can't criticize the government. There's been pushback. I know some of the hosts on Facebook who I think have, or on, YouTube, who have some credibility, have challenged the narrative that China is committing a genocide against the people, the Uyghurs. And I don't know what the truth there is, what the truth lies. There are camps. There are absolutely concentration-style camps in Western China where apparently Uyghurs are being held. Now, I don't know to the degree to that, and maybe it's been overstated, overblown by the American media. I don't know. 240-242-5646. But it's still, a country where we should be taking a tough stance against. And I think we should also against Russia. But we should be negotiating with Russia, not killing Russia through our proxy Ukraine, and of course destroying Ukraine in the process. So this doesn't trouble me particularly about Rubio, that he has been a hardliner against China. I hope that his voice, to the extent he's promoting a bellicose ongoing war with Russia, will be drowned out. And there's reason to believe, which we'll get to. But to the extent I'm troubled by the Rubio pick, and I am troubled by it, if you're going to compare and contrast, right? I mean, that people always say, well, it's only a choice. Hell, you always say you should vote for Jill Stein. You voted for Jill Stein. Well, Jill Stein ain't going to be president. She ain't going to win. So you have to choose Harris because she'll be better. Well, let's compare and contrast. Rubio versus Antony Blinken. I talked about this. Antony Blinken has been an absolute horror show. He's been one of the worst. It's amazing how bad he has been as Secretary of State, completely failing to stop the devastating, destructive, incredibly costly war with Russia. It's been, there's no way to look at his performance there except give it an enormous F. But I want to play this. This is from those guys, the Do Dissidents Bros, and I do talk about them some because, I like to highlight other hosts, and maybe they have a little more influence with some people than I do, or maybe they have a lot more influence. Here they're going to talk about Antony Blinken. Remember, the choice was either Antony Blinken, as far as we know, maybe Harris would have polled Antony Blinken, but she seemed to be perfectly happy with all of his policy choices, all of his policy decisions, which was endless war with Russia, which was full, unwavering support for the genocide. So even if she picked someone else, there's no reason to think that someone else would have been less toxic for the world than Antony Blinken. Here's the due distance bros kind of saying what I said yesterday, but maybe saying it a little bit differently. And maybe for some more persuasively.
The said on Tuesday that it did not plan to decrease weapons aid to Israel as a 30-day deadline set by the Biden administration passed without the country substantially improving the humanitarian situation in war-devastated Gaza. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin had warned in a letter dated October 13th that the United States would reassess its military aid to Israel if it failed to increase the amount of aid allowed to enter Gaza within 30 days. Again, that is not stellar reporting by the old gray lady there, because they had specific benchmarks that they were supposed to hit. It's not just this, this vague thing where, you have to increase the amount of aid. 350 trucks per day. That's going to come up later. That's just one of a long list of things. Not isolating the North, which of course they have done. They very famously isolated the North. They wouldn't even let reporters into northern Gaza to report on what was going on. Okay. The letter said that the humanitarian situation for the 2 million residents of Gaza was increasingly dire, and that the amount of aid entering Gaza had fallen by 50% since April. By law, the U.S. government cannot give aid to foreign military forces deemed by the State Department to be committing gross violations of human rights. UN officials have said Israel's continued blocking of humanitarian aid and targeting of humanitarian workers constitute violations of international law and could amount to war crimes. So we're going to play some State Department video here in just a second, but I just do want to take a pause. When we were on the Post-Duopoly show, Nick said that it would really be
I want to stop it right here because they're going to talk. I let that just go because I thought everything that Keaton said there was spot on. And by the way, just a real quick analysis. I know from looking at the chat, some of the folks in there are watch this program, and I like this program too, and I want to give a comment on it. By the way, I hear what you're saying about China. I don't want war with China, but I think the problem is that we have enriched and empowered China by actions that have also subsequently diminished our country, especially on manufacturing base, and that's a problem. And so I think it's not so much that I want war, but I want us to recognize that China's interests are very divergent from not only our interests, but I think from a prosperous world, a clean, environmentally friendly, peaceful world, just as the U.S. government has acted in ways that are completely divergent from those goals. So I just want to make a quick comment about due dissidence rather than just, play the clip, which is a little over 3 minutes without break. I really like Keaton. I think he's super smart. I think he and I pretty much agree on most everything. There are some issues where I actually like what Russ has to say, but I think he actually, sorry to say this, if you're a Russ Dobular fan, I think he detracts a little bit. I think sometimes he steps on what Keaton has to say, and Keaton's pretty deferential to him. I don't think he brings a lot to the table in toto. So just a quick criticism there of our due dissidence bros friends. Also, Weiss is going to talk about, and I backtracked it by 5 seconds, Nick Cruz of Revolutionary Blackout Network. And I asked Carlos when he was on once, what does Revolutionary Blackout Network mean? What does that blackout mean? I don't know. I want to figure that out. But Cruz was a huge opponent of Harris. He felt she was a terrible choice. He was not ever going to support her, and he was angry at anyone who called for people to vote for her. So Nick Cruz and I see eye to eye on that, and on most, but not on everything. He centers race more than I do, but of course he's black, I'm white, so maybe that's why that would explain. Here is what Cruz has to say. And this is really the meat of this. This is why I played it. I gave you that long intro because I wanted you to hear all the facts that belie the conclusion of Antony Blinken, the lie that Antony Blinken's State Department is promoting, that Israel is somehow now not violating international law, international norms, that Israel is now allowing humanitarian aid. I wanted you to hear all the evidence, the overwhelming evidence that Israel is out of compliance. And then we're going to hear the analysis by Nick Cruz. Here we go.
Monopoly show, Nick said that it would really be a stain on humanity if Kamala wins this election, given what's happening now. And that's what I thought when I read this. Imagine if they had won the election. Let's just say in a parallel universe, in an alternate universe where Arab and Muslim voters in Michigan were actually really won over by this boondoggle of, oh, well, we're going to give them 30 days to increase aid. Imagine they had won the election. Imagine that progressives had rallied around them and voted for them based on this promise. And
by the way, this is a point that really rankles me too, is the way the institutional left rallied behind Harris. This was such a failure of our revolutions, the PDAs, the Sierra Clubs. You know, the Sierra Club, I guess, endorsed her. Now, Harris Biden had been a disaster for the environment. This was an opportunity where we together might have been able to build real critical mass behind the Green Party. And it was completely flushed away by relatively flush institutional left organizations. What was that group? Well, certainly Climate Defiance completely broke my heart. There were DSA organizers who were knocking doors for Harris. This was a remarkable failure on every count. The Sunrise Movement. How you could support a candidate of endless war. You're an environmental group. You're supporting a candidate the candidate of endless war of Wall Street, of fracking. Give me a break. Come on.
10 days after the election, they say, well, our findings are in. Turns out they're doing a bang-up job, so we're going to keep the weapons going. Like, these are just it is just the most vile, despicable administration easily since George W. Bush. In a way, worse. I mean, I never thought I would say that about an administration, but in a way, it's worse. Yeah. Now, look, George Bush would have done the same thing had circumstances been this, right?
Sure.
But in a way, this is worse. I mean, this is just the deliberate shooting of fish in a barrel. You know, with Iraq, you could say they were totally indifferent to the suffering that operation would visit upon Iraqi civilians. But this wasn't a sustained and deliberate effort to murder as many civilians as possible or displace as many civilians as possible.
That wasn't the point.
That wasn't the express stated goal.
Right. So, I mean, that's exactly correct. That's a huge difference. That's how the argument is very just, very fair, that as bad as W was as a president and as bad as his policy was with regard to the Middle East, maybe Biden's even worse. And I put W in my worst three list, the worst three presidents of all time, along with Andrew Jackson, who apparently is one of Trump's favorites, Nixon, and then W, my three worst presidents. But, you know, when you look at what Biden's done, what Harris have done, what Antony Blinken has done, I mean, that's right there when you look at the support for the killing, the massacres, the pogrom that is the death camp that is Gaza. So I think all of that, you know, you're right there. Now, the thing is, one factor that might militate or mitigate, or whatever the word is, militate in favor of W being worse and the invasion of Iraq being even worse is that they tortured, right? I mean, the U.S. government policy itself was torture. Now, Israel tortures. There's no question Israel tortures. As bad as Abu Ghraib, which was really, really, really bad. But Abu Ghraib was a U.S. prison. Israel is actually committing the torture, not the United States. So I don't know if you want to split hairs and say, we are not the ones torturing. We're not the ones committing the murders. We're just supporting them. I don't know. Go there. You can be my guest free. But the reason I bring all this up is the argument that somehow you cannot support Jill Stein because you're helping Trump, and Trump will be by an order of magnitude worse than Harris Biden. That fails when you look at Antony Blinken and you compare him with Trump's nominee Marco Rubio. Now, if you look at the other, I didn't talk about yet, did we mention Gates? We may have. Let's get to Tulsi and Hegseth, I believe, the kind of the foreign policy people on that list. Well, so is Rubio. But I talked about Rubio yesterday. I don't really want to focus too much more on Rubio. The New York Times doesn't like Tulsi. They do not like Tulsi. Tulsi, remember, first became kind of a household name when she forsook, is that a word? She forsook Hillary for Bernie, and that just went over like a lead balloon with the corporate elites, the media elites. Of course, it was a heroic, it was a great thing that she did. It was true heroism. That she was able, she would stand up to Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and Hillary is really quite remarkable, and she deserves much love for that. Doesn't mean she gets to do bad things after that, but it's certainly a positive reflection of her. So, according to the New York Times, Gabbard has long been popular with Russian state media. Oh my God, I don't know. I guess she's been on Russia Today, RT. Democratic senators are expected to ask her about meeting with Bashar al-Assad of Syria and past embrace of Russian talking points. So to me, that's really good. Those are good things. Maybe we'll have peace with Russia. Maybe this horrible war where we've fomented against Russia, the proxy war, will really end. This sends a positive, this is a positive signal. And I was very pleased when I learned that Tulsi was going to be the Director of National Intelligence, right? CIA, is that CIA Director is what they call it? I don't know. DNI, Director of National Intelligence. I think it means CIA Director, but I'm not even certain about that. This is a positive for sure. Also, yes, you should have met with Assad. Absolutely. Of course you should. He's a world leader. Syria's a really important country. Assad's has done a lot of bad things. He probably didn't gas his own people. That was a false flag. That was almost very likely our proxy allies against Syria. It was a proxy war where we embraced actually Al-Qaeda and ISIL against Syria. So it was good. That was a good thing that Tulsi did, and we should be pleased. That she may be the new Director of National Intelligence. And let me look this up because I'm really curious. And I really couldn't figure it. I assume the CIA Director, it must be the same as Director of National Intelligence, right? But I'm going to look that up. Maybe there's two different. Pompeo was the CIA Director before he became Secretary of State. The current Director of National Intelligence is Avril Haines. And that is a cabinet level position. That is not CIA Director. So there are two different titles. And I think so she's going to be above that. Okay, so I just looked it up, folks. Sorry, it took me a moment to figure this out, which I still haven't. But as best I can understand, Tulsi will be above the CIA Director, who will report directly to her. So she'll be in the room. She's the cabinet. It's a good thing that she wants peace with Russia to the extent we can divine it. She hasn't been a peacenik by any means. I wish she was more pro-peace. She seems to really dislike a lot of, she seems to be somewhat of an Islamophobe, although she met again with Assad. But Assad was not an Islamist in any ways, very, very much a secular Arab. So we'll see. But again, as best I can tell, I'm cautiously optimistic that we may see Trump wind down the proxy war with Russia. And that will be a really good thing. Now, do I want Russia to take over Ukraine? Of course not. But I don't really think that is his goal. I think he wants to declare war and go home. The war's been incredibly expensive. He wants assurances does Putin, as he's always said, he wants assurances, and it's understandable by certainly that we're going to stay out of Ukraine. We're not going to have NATO there. And it's understandable that he would take that position. It's very understandable, as a matter of fact. So here's what Hegseth has to say. He criticized our involvement in Ukraine, said Putin probably wouldn't go much further if he wins. This is from Business Insider. I don't think that's really arguable. So again, New York Times doesn't like him, but he seems to be pretty much reasonable. I know he's an outsider. He was in the army, I guess, but he didn't, not the general, not part of the Washington insider defense establishment. That's kind of a good thing. Not a good thing to be part of Fox News, but, I guess you pick your poison. So Hegseth says he doesn't want U.S. intervention to push Putin to consider nuclear weapons. Well, does anybody? I guess Victoria Nuland did. I guess Kamala did when she rallied all those NATO countries together to put a force together to fight Russia rather than to push for peace. She says, I don't want American intervention driving deep into Europe and making Putin feel like he's on his heels, because that's how we get a nuclear war. That's what Hegseth says. Seems reasonable. And then he goes on to say, we burned 2 decades of money in Afghanistan and Iraq, and we were tempted to do it again in Ukraine. My gosh, this guy, he seems downright reasonable. He seems downright sane. Why would we be demonizing him? You don't like, the reason I think we wouldn't in the end like Trump, and I know everything was done to demonize him as a human being. He's a rapist. He's a sexual predator. He's a liar. And there's truth to that, right? This guy did a lot of bad things. But right now, he's going to be president. And what matters, he's going to be president again. What matters is policy. What is he going to do when it comes to the U.S. government's policies overseas and domestically? That's what matters to everyday Americans. That's what matters to you in the end. And at least when it comes to the Russia-Ukraine policy, this guy Hegseth seems pretty decent. I'm very, very afraid that Gaza is gone. It's going to be the people there. The people of Gaza are just being wiped out, and I don't have hope that will end. Could it? Would it? I don't know. We know Harris will not stop it. I saw this remarkable. I didn't snip it, but on Facebook where I said, hey, if you really believed that Harris Biden was going to stop killing, but they couldn't say anything. That's, by the way, one of the things the Due Distance Bros. I didn't play the entire clip. I probably should have. But yeah, they made this point too, which I've made, which is that there's no excuse now for not stopping the killing. There's no political argument that they have to, they can't poke their finger in the eye of AIPAC because they could be targeted before the election and it could hurt them. There's no such argument because the election's over. I saw this point made. Hey, why does it matter what Harris Biden do now? Because Trump will be taking office and he'll stop the killing when he takes office. And I found that to be such a tone deaf and insensitive comment. First of all, because let's just assume for the moment it's true. We don't have reason to believe that Trump will make things, will stop Bibi. We have no reason to believe that. We have reason to believe just the opposite. But let's just assume for the moment that it's true. That once Trump takes office, he will make that phone call to Bibi and he'll tell Bibi to cut it out and Bibi will. Let's just assume that's true. How is that an argument for Harris Biden not stopping the supply of arms to Israel now. How is that an argument for Harris Biden not sending military troops to the Middle East now to deploy against the Israeli military to stop the killing? Wouldn't we want the killing to stop right now? If it's only going to happen when Trump takes office in 2 months, that means Israel's going to be killing another 30, 40 people a day for the next, which is, their average of late, I guess, 50 a day. Let's go with 50 because it's a nice round number. That means another 3,000 will die. That's another 9/11 if Biden and Harris don't act. And the argument is, well, it doesn't matter what they do now because Trump will do whatever he does in 2 months. No, it matters right now very, very much. But there's another possibility. Trump won't stop Israel, which is probably what will happen. He won't. So if that is the likelihood, that's all the more reason Harris Biden need to act now. Stop the supply of arms now. Give Gaza a pause now. Rally the international community against Israel now. Send in the military now. Because then maybe that will stop Trump from being able to reboot the Israeli occupation, murder, genocide, apartheid, ethnic cleansing. So to me, there's just a complete failure to recognize the pure evil, which is exactly what Keaton Weiss called it, by the way, evil of the Israeli occupation and genocide, and our support, our aiding and abetting that, our complicity. The Times views the actions by Trump, the nominations, the named cabinet members, as fueled by retribution. We used that term before. And I looked through the article. I couldn't find any examples of any of these picks saying anything about, we're going to get back at those Democrats. We're going to hurt them for what they did. They targeted Trump, which they most certainly did, right? I mean, there were all these failed impeachment efforts. There were distractions rather than focusing on making life better for average, everyday Americans. Instead, Jamie Raskin impeaches a guy who's not even in office and completely fails and makes him more popular. So you might think the Republicans would say, well, we should go after them. They were clearly motivated by hyper-partisan concerns rather than the best interest of the American public. But I didn't find anything in that New York Times article to bolster the claim that Trump was acting through these nominations to seek vengeance on his political enemies. They do, but here's what the writer Katie Rogers has to say. The plans for retribution are best summarized by Matt Gaetz, who wrote of his enthusiasm for the wholesale elimination of federal law enforcement agencies. So explain to me how eliminating the FBI and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms is retribution. I don't really, I mean, the FBI, I guess they investigated Trump during his first term, but that wasn't really the main basis, was it, for at least the impeachments against him for the Ukraine, right? Because he withheld the arms from Ukraine for a while, and also during the beginning of the Biden-Harris term, when Raskin led that impeachment effort, that failed effort was based on January 6, October 7, based on January 6. So, I mean, they just don't like the FBI, and I get it. Yeah, the FBI was Comey and all that, and they did have that bogus Russiagate scandal that they helped promote. But I think it's more just they don't like federal agencies, to be perfectly honest. But the political enemies aren't the FBI. The political enemies of Donald Trump are Jamie Raskin. I mean, they're the usual suspects, Nancy Pelosi. Those are the people, Chuck Schumer. There's nothing about going after them. The Democratic Party, there's nothing. He just says, we ought to have a full court press against this weaponized government. So that's not retribution. He wants to press back against the government turned against our people. And if that means abolishing every one of the three-letter agencies from the FBI to the ATF, I'm ready to get going. All right, I don't think they should be abolished. I think those agencies obviously serve very important purposes. But let's face it, the FBI has been corrupt. The FBI has served as an instrument of the rich and powerful. It is used against progressive groups. And I think a lot of progressives would say, yeah, we don't like the FBI either. So to me, that's not proof that there's some kind of retribution. He's not saying let's lock up the Democrats or even close. Now, that term retribution is used not just in the New York Times. I want to get, because I think the AP here does a little bit better job maybe explaining what they're talking about than the Times. In nominating close ally Gates, Trump shows he values loyalty and retribution. Let's get our enemy. Let's have, which was interesting because I hear this so much from Democrats. We've got to lock him up. We've got to put him in jail. Sounds like a lot of Democrats are seeking retribution against Trump. So I think that's pretty much a lot of projection, shall we say. So with the Gates nomination, by the way, Gates clearly not qualified. I don't know. What is he, like a 30-year-old guy? Where's his, he's been investigated. He was charged with, or there were allegations of, I guess, him having sex with underage people, which is terrible, if it's true. Apparently, they were not confirmed, as far as we know. As far as I know, they weren't confirmed. He says Gates would be a disaster because of threats, Trump's threat to use the Justice Department to seek revenge. Yeah, Trump did say that, apparently. But Gates didn't say anything that suggests. Gates didn't say anything that suggests he was going to seek revenge. Now, he's just holding back. He's holding his fire. I don't think he's qualified. I think was a bad choice. But it is what it is. So Merrick Garland, we're trying to compare, right? Compare and contrast. I can't see Marco Rubio as, at this point, even as bad as Anthony Blinken. He might prove me wrong, but for Secretary of State, I can't see that choice as being worse. The security picks, Gabbard and Hegseth, from what I can glean at this point, maybe an upgrade. Certainly not a downgrade from the, this incredibly pro-war administration we have so far. And Gates versus Merrick Garland, I think that on balance, you have to give the nod to the Biden folks there. Gates is totally inexperienced. I didn't even know he was a lawyer. He does have experience with the Justice Department, with criminal justice system as a potential defendant. He's not qualified. It's just a joke of a pick by, come on, Trump. That's just, you can't defend that. And the Biden Justice Department did some good things, especially when it comes to the antitrust activities there. Was it enough? Was it well publicized? No. But it was a good thing. All right, 240-242-5646. We got a few more minutes. I don't know, did anyone try to call? I can't see. I'm looking now to see. Looks like someone did. No calls. 240-242-5646. Let's just finish off with a little chat here. I've been going for an hour. That's good. Bitcoin. What do you call this stuff? This is that. Because Bitcoin is one of the cryptocurrencies. And apparently, Trump got some support from the Bitcoin people. Now, I don't. I think this is just an example. This really shows how our society is falling apart. People embrace this non-government currency. It has no extrinsic value whatsoever. I was comparing it to the tulip bulb craze, although tulip bulbs actually had some value because you could plant the bulb and then you'd get a tulip. And they are perennial, so they keep coming back. Not worth what, the people would save up, a house. You got a fancy tool. Apparently, I think this is true. You can look this up. In 17th century Holland, and I'm not sure the year, there was a point where a particularly fancy, colorful Turkish tulip bulb, one, might cost as much as an entire house in Amsterdam. I may be wrong about that. One tulip, the same value as a house. So obviously, massive inflation, overvaluation of that tulip bulb. And I sort of view the same thing with crypto. There's no real value. The difference between people say, well, there's no real value to that dollar in your pocket. Yeah, the government guarantees it as against all debts, public and private. So that's the value, is that it is the currency that we use. Otherwise, I'd have to take a cow with me when I go out to the store to pay for, groceries. I'd have to, milk the cow or whatever, give 5% of the cow to the grocer in return for a bag full of groceries. So no, that's the point. The one value I've heard that I think makes some sense with crypto is you can kind of consolidate your assets. You want to escape a tyrannical regime, you consolidate it, and you can leave your country, and it's still you can access that store of value. But it's still only worth what someone else will pay for it. It doesn't have any extrinsic value on its own. And you can use, there's other ways, by the way, to get your assets out of a dangerous regime. For example, you just buy stock. I don't see how that's not, you can't just simply invest in in stock. You have an account, account online, and you buy the problem is that can be accessed by governments. The difference is that if I'm living in a tyrannical regime that doesn't want to let me leave Burma or something, Myanmar, then Ukraine, apparently there were people who were fleeing Ukraine. You couldn't get your assets out. Maybe the country can freeze the assets that are in a bank, but they can't do that with crypto. So I want to play this. So I'll give you that. So maybe, but does that make it really a valuable option? This was a question. I'm going to go out with this because this is something that people really care about. And I think, again, it shows not just that there's a rationality, but also people have given up on the idea that together we can solve our problems through government, that we can elect progressive leaders who will act in our best interests, who will maintain stable value of currency, who will, protect us when we retire. I think people have given up on that. And so we embrace, some people do anyway, I think non-solutions, solutions that put us at risk of scammers and flim-flammers. And if you want to say Trump is one of them, that's fine, go ahead. But the options were not good in the last election. Here's Chris Van Hollen, and it was a good conversation with Van Hollen. By the way, Van Hollen, I gave him a lot of props, but one big disappointment, he has not signed on, as far as I know, at least as of yesterday, joint resolution of disapproval of any further aid to Israel. He has not signed on to that, and he has been one of the best senators when it comes to criticizing Israel, but he has not shown real bravery in this area, and it's a real disappointment. All right, here's Chris Van Hollen.
How the Democratic Party intends on winning back the 40% of Americans who have invested in or worked in the cryptocurrency industry. All
right, let me replay that because it was very soft-spoken and it was hard to hear this guy, but he asks about Americans who have invested in crypto.
The Democratic Party intends on winning back the 40% of Americans who have invested in or worked in the cryptocurrency industry.
All right, so he asks, how can the Democratic Party win back the 40% of Americans who have invested in crypto? 40% seems awfully high. I'm very doubtful about that figure. I don't know where that came from. That just seems made up, but guess maybe, I don't know. I guess maybe if you're involved, if you have some sort of a index fund, but I don't think index funds invest in crypto, so I'm sure that's just a false number. But let's hear what Van Hollen has to say. And this was a factor. You know, on the margins, there are young people who are definitely crypto fans because they don't trust the government to shore up Social Security. They don't view that as a hedge for them, a protection for them, and they're probably right. They don't trust Wall Street. They don't trust anything, and that's understandable because our institutions have failed us. This is exactly the same, by the way, mindset that completely rejects vaccines. For-profit healthcare has been terrible in many, many ways. Vaccines are effective. Vaccines are essential. But people just don't trust for-profit healthcare or anything that comes out of it, including vaccines at this point. People don't trust Wall Street. They view crypto as an alternative. Tragically, crypto makes money for Wall Street.
They view presently the Democratic Party as extremely hostile to the way we wish to make a living, particularly young people who can't afford houses.
Yeah. So this is, this is an issue which, as you mentioned, was an issue in the campaign. It's one of those issues that has sort of, for those who follow crypto, it's been an issue that's been in the works for some time. But I would say politically, this is the first time this has been a big issue in a presidential campaign. And look, here's the thing about crypto, and in my view, there's lots of misinformation on all sides on crypto. My number one goal is to make sure that when you're in this crypto era, that people, consumers, are protected. I think we would all agree on that. I mean, people in the crypto business say that that is also their goal.
All right, so that's what he says. He just addresses it, and apparently that was, and then he goes on and on about it. But I just wanted to bring that up because that was a factor. And Trump has, addressed this in a more specific, because that was what Harris said too. We want to protect investors, but she was not real clear what protection means. Trump actually, to his credit, did some research, did some homework, and I think he was also a little bit afraid because RFK Jr. was a crypto, was a fan of, was supported by there were a lot of fanboys of RFK Jr. in the crypto investor group. What Trump said was, which I think really bolstered his standing among some crypto enthusiasts, was that when the government seizes assets in criminal cases, it's not going to sell those assets, especially if they're crypto, right? He would create a national Bitcoin reserve. So let's say that you convict a drug dealer, a drug kingpin, and they have a few $1 million in Bitcoin, which, by the way, I don't know how you'd even prove it or get it, because isn't all that blockchain set up? You have to have all sorts of, codes and things that nobody else can have or access. And if you lose the code, you can't access the Bitcoin anyway. Well, whatever Trump said, we're not going to sell it. So that means that you reduce the supply. Because if the Bitcoin is just going to be sitting in on some computer server somewhere, never ever sold, then the price of the Bitcoins that are in circulation will continue to rise, or will be anyway valued at a higher level, I suppose. And that was enough for some Bitcoin enthusiasts, I suppose. Apparently, they also don't like this guy, Gary Gensler. I think Gensler's gone after Bitcoin scammers, people like Sam Friedman-Banks. Is that his name, Sam Friedman-Banks? That should be something that Bitcoin people would appreciate, right? Because Sam Bankman-Fried, what did I call him? Friedman-Banks. Sam Bankman-Fried. You'd think that the crypto people would like that because they're being scammed by some of these bad actors, but apparently they don't really know. I think the whole thing is crazy. I'm just bringing this up as an example where, again, it seems like the Harris walls group just really missed the boat. They just didn't really get where the American public are, which is tremendous skepticism, which is tremendous cynicism of anything that's smacks of any central government. And they just didn't address it. They weren't able to talk about that. I don't think they even understand it. Okay, that's going to do it for me. Thanks for all the comments. Love the comments in the chat. And I'm sorry, Shade, I didn't really get to you. But likes, this is real quick. Trump likes people he can blackmail, especially those that can investigate or charge him. You sound like a Trumper. Oh, so that goes to the Gates pick? It may be. It may be that he has something on Gates, or he thinks he has something on Gates. I don't doubt that. I don't think Gates was a good pick. I think he's totally unqualified. I don't see how that makes me sound like a Trumper. The only other point I made was I don't see where the retribution is coming in, where somehow picking Gates exemplifies how he's seeking vengeance on his political enemies. I'll be back tomorrow. Thanks for watching. Thanks for commenting. And please do call. I would really want to hear from you. I want to hear your voice.